there's been a magnificent degree of hypocrisy and the way that the war in Saudi Arabia has been covered by the media and has even been engaged by other Democrats. Let's look at where this starts before going into the vote. But in a nutshell, the Senate, in a sharp rebuke, voted 63 to 37 to yank support for the war in for Saudi Arabia. Now, to some degree, this is a punishment of Khashoggi, but to a larger degree, this goes beyond Khashoggi, and this goes to this thing of attacking Trump, especially if you're a Democrat. Take a look at this, but let's see where it starts. This is New York Times. This goes to the beginnings of the war in Yemen. This started back in 2015. 2 days of discussions in the West Wing followed, but there was a little real debate. Among other reasons, the White House needed to placate the Saudis as the administration completed a nuclear deal with Iran, Saudi Arabia's arch enemy. That fact alone eclipsed concerns that many of the president's advisors that Saudi-led offensive would be long, bloody, and indecisive. The White House, meaning the Obama administration, understood that a lot of people were going to be killed and slaughtered, and that this was going to be a long, bloody conflict. Mr. Obama soon gave his approval for Pentagon to support the impending military campaign. That's amazing. We understand that it's going to be long and bloody, but hey, go ahead anyway, because Saudi Arabia, for whatever, gets to pull on our foreign policy. So the deal with Iran couldn't just be a deal with Iran in and of itself. We have to also greenlight a bloody war. Now, in this bloody war, nobody said anything. Like, this had gone on for years with nobody saying anything. The media barely reporting on it. You had indie sources that was mentioning it. But for the most part, it was out of sight, out of mind. No drama, Obama got it. And because no drama, Obama got it, let's keep going. So you give logistical support. Information was released showing that there was a military raids, probably by some kind of us assisting in military raids and these special operations that they don't necessarily want to talk about, but was accidentally leaked. And the bombings, meaning the assistant in-air assisting in those bombing raids. Many of those bombing raids just massacring civilians. In one case, getting a lot of publicity when they murdered a bunch of kids. Even going so far in the media of showing which weapons company was giving them the weapons, what they were using to bomb and massacre children. This even goes into the humanitarian disaster where you have millions of people who will potentially starve. You've had tens of thousands that have died either through starvation or disease in the way that Saudis were weaponizing disease and weaponizing starvation. And through it all, we assisted. Nobody said squat, or few and far between people would say squat. Again, no drama, Obama got it. Trump takes office. The Democratic Party immediately is concerned about this conflict. Oh my God, we don't like the support that Donald Trump has given to the Saudis. Now, all of a sudden, all of this concern, this wellspring of concern that didn't seem to be there before when their president was managing this bloodfest. Donald Trump has come out saying, we're going to stop fueling airplanes. That's great, but that doesn't really matter because Donald Trump is also green light giving them the same planes that did the fueling themselves, meaning they have the capabilities to do it themselves. They don't need our assistance on it. That was somewhat of a sleight of hand by a reality show host. The media reported one, whereas the other side didn't necessarily get that much value, meaning he was, tickling your ass while smiling at you. But whatever. It's hypocritical. I'll take it. I don't like the support that we're giving Saudi Arabia. I don't even know if that support is legal, and let alone moral. We are essentially giving them weapons and munitions and logistical support for them to murder a large number of civilians under the fig leaf that Iran has something to do with the Houthis. Now, they always use Iran and Houthis together as if Iran is, giving them all of this backing. We don't know if that's true. They've just used that as a justification to propagate this war. Democrats are being hypocritical on this. They didn't care when it was in Obama's administration. Now they care. But they're using this as a lightning rod to attack Trump. After Khashoggi got killed, one of the big things that people, you could put a face on the person. The person lived in America for God knows how long. He was a journalist at the Washington Post. And or whatever you want to think of him, meaning, he chose the wrong prince. I agree with that assessment. But he was still a person that lived in the United States that got murdered in brutal mob-style fashion, where they cut the guy to pieces, put his body in acid. And there's a tape of this. The assessment of the CIA is that Mohammed bin Salman did it. They ordered it. That's the assessment of the CIA. Now, I think it's somewhat of a logical assessment, but they're using a little bit more information based on conversations that they intercepted in order to come to that conclusion. Donald Trump doesn't want to believe that. And because Donald Trump wants to believe that, it's kind of like a pin in chess. Ultimately, you're attacking the thing that's that he's associated with. And so on this attack with Saudi Arabia, you can tie Donald Trump to Saudi Arabia, saying, look at what Donald Trump was willing to abide. Look at what Donald Trump is willing to abide. He's still sticking by this bloodthirsty murderer. Why is the president sticking by this bloodthirsty murderer? The overwhelming majority of American sentiment is we should not be funding this bloodthirsty theocratic regime. By about 80%. Stop funding and assisting this bloodthirsty regime. So it makes a great attack point where you could tie the president with and continue to attack that particular arrangement, meaning our military arrangement and our association with Saudi Arabia. It becomes an attack point of Donald Trump at that point. You're attacking him by association. It seems that the Republican senators were bothered by the Khashoggi killing and bothered by Donald Trump not being responsive to the Khashoggi killing. Like standing by Salman when it's understood, at least assumed, that he was the one that ordered this murder. You would think that the large-scale murder of a lot of people would be enough. Apparently it's not. The murder of one man was enough. Again, I understand the hypocrisy. I'll take it. I want our support for that conflict to end. I want that conflict to end. Now, the senators voted this down, voted for this bill to get rid of, and it was a Bernie Sanders, Mike Lee bill, to stop supporting the war after the Saudi Arabia, the Yang support. This may create a conflict in the war powers resolution in regards to who gets to control the war apparatus. Can the president just decide to go roving the globe, attacking one place or the next, or does Congress, after all, control the reins of war? Now, supposedly Congress controls the reins of war, but that hasn't necessarily been what's been taking place. The president has accrued all sorts of powers in that office, never more powerful than when he's at war. And so you can imagine that us being in this kind of war on terror has allowed the president a certain latitude to engage in military affairs and bombings and all sorts of stuff. Congress is finally trying to assert itself again, which is great. Now, where this bill goes is unclear. There's going to be another vote coming up to see whether this bill gets advanced in regards to opening up debate on the relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia. Many of the people expressed concern that they didn't allow Bloody Gina Haspel to come and give part of the talks. Mike Pompeo and Mattis gave talks to the senators saying, don't do this, don't advance this bill. Donald Trump in the White House has threatened to veto if this bill, if it, I guess, passed the House, it came up to his desk. Whether they have enough to override the veto is unknown, at least with the numbers they have right now, not so much. But long story short, Congress has started to assert itself. If you notice, there was a bill in the House of Representatives that also tried to come up that Rokana pushed. So there is going to be some level of agreement on this in a Democratic-controlled House and a Republican-controlled Senate. I've said earlier in my other videos that they were losing, the Democrats and the Republicans, on this particular issue, and that there was some level of agreement that they didn't, of not participating with Saudi Arabia in its blood-soaked campaign. I think that's the basics of it. Let's go into a little bit more detail and call this one a day. In sharp rebuke of the Trump administration, the Senate on Wednesday voted to advance a resolution demanding an end to the U.S. support for Saudi Arabia's coalition in the Yemen conflict, despite extraordinary efforts by top administration officials to convince lawmakers to quash it. The resolution passed its first hurdle of a vote by a vote of 63-37. The wide margin reflects broad concern about the American role in the war and a growing anger amongst lawmakers over the Trump administration's continuing support for Saudi Arabia following the murder of dissident journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Right here. This conflict isn't optional for Saudi Arabia, and abandoning it puts American interests at risk too, Pompeo said in a briefing, according to one of the prepared remarks released to reporters. What would happen if the United States withdrew from Yemen effort? Guess what? The war wouldn't end, he said. Yeah, but it would end our assistance in it. Whether the war ends or not, we shouldn't be supporting them in a blood-soaked campaign. It's bad enough that we went on a campaign of terror through the Middle East. You've given them weapons and munitions that would allow them to continue this war. But the war wouldn't end. Okay, why do we need to be a part of it? Then why do we need to be a part of it? I mean, for fuck's sake. But the briefing appears to have backfired. Both Democrat and Republican senators said afterwards that the argument seemed weak. Others fumed over the White House decision to block CIA Director Gina Haspel from briefing the Senate on the Khashoggi killing. Bloody Gina has reportedly heard a recording of Khashoggi's murder committed at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul last month. The Haspel no-show really pissed people off, one senator aide told Foreign Policy. Many others exasperated over Donald Trump's refusal to declare whether Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, de facto ruler of the kingdom, personally directed Khashoggi's murder following reports that the CIA concluded that he ordered the hit. Senator Bob Corker from Tennessee, chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, told Foreign Policy on Wednesday that there was a lack of balance in the administration's approach to Saudi Arabia. As much as I respect him, there was no attempt to try to realign it in the declassified briefing. The initiative approved on Wednesday, championed by Senator Mike Lee and Bernie Sanders, invokes the War Powers Resolution to impose a withdrawal of the U.S. military from the Yemen conflict. The interesting part here, though, is there is a debate on whether the War Powers Resolution is even constitutional. This vote could bring that debate to a head and heighten the disagreement in Washington over the United States' relationship with Saudi Arabia. Even if we pass it, the administration will likely turn right around and say, well, the War Powers is not constitutional, so we're not bound by this. Well, that's a fight that you need to have then. I mean, if you believe that Congress has power to declare war and that the War Powers Act is constitutional, meaning people don't like to give up power, so if a president accrues a certain power in that office, or if Congress believes it has a certain authority and power, they don't tend to like to give that up without a fight. Well, here you go. There's your fight. If this is the hill that you need to die on, this is the hill that you need to die on. But we should not continue to support that bloodthirsty regime. They're spreading terrorism all throughout that region of the world. And lest we forget, there were Saudis on those airplanes that hit us on 9/11. This is a relationship that needs to be reevaluated. I mean, for fuck's sake. It's not that I believe that Obama would be doing that much different in that office. I mean, he might be more inclined to blame Salman, but that wouldn't be a rebalancing of the relationship. He would still stay with the same relationship. He might not be as cartoonish as Donald Trump is dealing with it. He may be more honest about it. But at the end of the day, I have a hard time believing that he would somehow cut the weapons deals. I don't believe it. The mechanics of the vote itself are complicated, layered in arcane Senate rules. The vote Wednesday green-lighted discharging the resolution for a Senate-wide vote. The second vote to advance the resolution to a final vote is expected to take place early next week, congressional staffers told Foreign Policy. If passed, senators will have the opportunity to tack on amendments to the resolution before final vote is voted on. In the weeks ahead, congressional staffers told FP that they expect the White House to lean heavily on lawmakers to withdraw their support for the resolution. And just so we're clear on what's taking place in Yemen. As the drama plays out in Washington, Yemen is mired in catastrophe with millions facing famine and relying on dwindling supplies for humanitarian aid. Yemen's three-year conflict is considered the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. More than 3/4 of its population, or 22.2 million people, require aid, and some 14 million people face starvation, according to the United Nations. More than half of the population does not have access to drinking water, and the conflict has fueled the worst cholera outbreak in modern history. According to UNICEF, at least one child in Yemen dies every 10 minutes from an illness or starvation. land of the free and the home of the brave. We're assisting maniacs. We're assisting bloodthirsty maniacs. Aid workers and local physicians are struggling to help the population. The ongoing blockade of the port city of Hodeidah, where between 70 and 80% of Yemen's commercial and humanitarian imports into the country, has denied civilians access to medicine, fuel, food, and other essential items. Last month, Mattis and Pompeo called for a ceasefire within 30 days. While a pause in the violence has so far been elusive, meaning hasn't happened, Mattis indicated last week that the UN brokered peace talks between Saudi coalition and Iran-backed Houthis were slated for December. They always use Iran-backed Houthis because they use that as justification for them destroying that country. There should be a little bit more evidence to show that they're backed by Iran in the way that they're saying they're backed by Iran. We are backing the Saudis with logistical support, munitions, weapons. We're arming them to the teeth, and we're flying raiding missions, and in some cases, apparently special operations. That's what support means from the standpoint of the United States. There is nothing to show that that's what Iran is doing from the standpoint of the Houthis. They ran with this thing of Iran-backed Houthis, and they just ran with it as if Iran was giving them all of the support that the United States was giving Saudi Arabia. It's nonsense. That needs to be proved, not just continuously stated. Earlier this month, the United States ended its fueling. Well, it ended the fueling because it gave over the capability for them to do it themselves. They didn't need it. It was so what? You ended the fueling if you gave them the capability to carry out those bombing strikes themselves. A new poll conducted by the International Rescue Committee and YouGov shows that the American public is growing weary of the violence. 75% of the people surveyed said they oppose U.S. military support and coalition efforts in Yemen, with 82% of respondents agreeing that Congress must vote to end or decrease arms sales. Agreed. Agreed. I agree with the American population on this. I agree with the American population. All right. I'm not going to keep this one because this one is already gone 17 minutes. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through PayPal or Patreon. They demonetize the videos like this because it's talking about issues of war and peace. So if you would like to support the content, please support the content. Thanks all.